All right, so we just did command injection, and let me just review that a bit because it'll make it easier to understand what's going on here. Now, the simple ping command injection that we did, you'd put in, you're able to put a semicolon, and then you can add a Linux command like ls. So here, you can execute commands arbitrarily in the language bash for Linux. And that's a pretty common language. A lot of people are familiar with that. That's what you see on Linux Journey. SQL injection works just the same, but the reason why people have trouble with it is it's a different language. It's SQL, and that is a strange language, not as common. So many people don't understand how SQL works. SQL is used to query databases. It doesn't have general purpose like bash. So here, I got a SQL server, and here I have, this is the administration console that only the administrator would be allowed to use. So here you can do things like show databases. These are SQL commands, and it'll show you what databases exist on this server, and it has two, one called information schema and one called widgets. Now, each query language, each SQL language, of which there's about 5 or 6 in common use, they have this automatically generated table, which contains general information about the structure of the database, which is real important for us because what you want to do, of course, is steal the confidential information as a hacker. You're trying to find things like credit card numbers and social security numbers. They're never in this automatically generated table. It just has the structure of the database. They're always in the table that was created for the company. And the problem is you need to know the name of the table you want to go into, and you need to know the name of the fields in the table. And so you have to find that, and you can find it here. So, for example, here, the administrator could just do a show tables, and then I'll see all the tables in a database, and what you'll see is it's only going to do the current database, which is widgets, so the only table in there is employees. It's only got one table. So now I know the name of the database and the name of the table. There's 3 levels of structure in a SQL database. There's the database, the table, and then the fields. Those are the 3 things you need. So now we can talk about other kinds of select. You can do this. You can select 1. This is like the echo command. Select is what retrieves data from a database, but you can also just select a constant. So select 1 will just produce the output 1. That might seem useless, but that will turn out to be useful later. You can select constant text like peanuts, and you can concatenate 2 words together with the concat function. So I can take peanut and butter and have peanut butter, and that's going to be important to us later. All right, and you can also pick substrings. Like this is going to pick the second letter, starting at the second letter, the next 2 letters out of the word peanut. So it's going to give me the E and the A. So you can pick letters out of a word. And that, all right. And now you can do a if statement. You can now check to see if the second letter, only 1 letter long, is equal to E. And it succeeded. There's the result. It gives you a result because that's true. And these constructions are going to be important to us later. So now, if you were the administrator and you wanted to know what's in the employees table, you could just do this. Select star from employees. That will give you all the information in the employees table. So now you'll see there's an ID, name, and social security number for some people in there. You get the name of the fields. But this is something you wouldn't want a user doing. You only want the administrator doing that. And the problem with SQL injection is the users can do things like that, but it's a little more difficult. So now the problem is, as we're going to see, you need to have the name of the table and the name of the fields. And so the way you do that is you go into this table, information schema tables, which is automatically generated and always has the same fields, same tables and fields. So for example, if you look at the tables in there, you'll find there's a whole lot of tables in capital letters. These are the automatically generated tables. And at the bottom, usually in small letters, is the one that contains the data you want in the other database. So that's the sort of thing you can find out here. All right, and so this is normal database administration done by the authorized administrator with these commands. So now let's go to what a hacker would do. There's some flags to find here. But for simple SQL injection, you can now just search for a name. Like if I search here, this is something you would let the user do. They can search for a name like on Facebook or something to find somebody. So you put in a name and it tries to find a user with that name, and it says, yes, I found it, Bill Gates. Now if I put in a name that's not in the database, like Joe, and search, I get no result. So I get a result if it's there, I get no result if it's not there. All right, that's fine. But now what happens if I put in a name with an apostrophe, like Tip O'Neill? Now you get a syntax error. Now this should never happen. This means you have command injection. If you ask the user for data, you process that data, but you should not be able to break the code with that data. What this means is it misinterpreted that data, and some of that it thought was a command. And you can see why. This is the actual command. Select name from employees where name equals, and this is controlled by the user. The problem is, it's done by matching these apostrophes. And so the apostrophe the user put in matched the apostrophe that the developer put in. So this ended the name, and this it tried to interpret as a SQL command, and nil is not a valid SQL command. That's why this is very common. This is SQL injection. It is, by the way, a very poor practice, and it comes from the same flaw I said before. You're mixing two languages together. This takes a language called PHP, and it creates a line of SQL and sends it off to the SQL processor. So it's just like the ping form. Instead of learning how to do things in one command, one language, you created data which was then reinterpreted by the next parser, and that's a problem. And there's, of course, a better way to do it. But this is the old-fashioned way, which is still used a lot, and has SQL injection vulnerabilities. So the thing here is, the fact that I had a syntax error tells me that I have this serious flaw. To exploit it, I have to inject something more careful than this. So instead of just crashing with an error, it will actually make an executable command there. And that's what you have if you have this. This is the most classic simple SQL injection. You put in the apostrophe, and then you put in this string, and now you get all the names, because now I put in that data, and it interpreted it as name of Sam or 1 equals 1, and then a comment character, got rid of the missing apostrophe at the end that would otherwise make it crash with an unmatched apostrophe. So this is now a valid condition where name is Sam, which is never true, or 1 equals 1, which is always true. So this was always true, and I get all the names. So that's pretty good, but I can only get the names. I'm not getting the social security numbers yet. To do that, you just need to have a little more complicated injection, and that's this one. See, you can combine two select queries. And so if I do this, I look for Sam, and then I add select 1. Then Sam gives me no result because there is no Sam, but 1 gives me 1. So you can combine two select queries together in the same line, but they have to have the same number of columns. So if I tried to do, let me go back here. If I try to do select 1, 2, then it will tell me you have different numbers of columns. You can't take one column of data and add to it something with 2 columns of data. So, all right, but the point is, now what I've done, remember I said this box up here is only for the database administrator. This box is for the customer. But now I've turned this box into that box. I can now execute arbitrary select commands even when the developer thought I was only feeding in a name. So now you can take any of these select queries up here and execute them. Like this one here, if I want a list of all the table names, I can take that one and put it in instead of this select 1. And now I can get all that information here. So I can do anything the developer could do. And now I can see there's an employees table and a passwords table. So now you can craft results. So all right, so say the passwords table looks pretty good. So I would like to know the field names in that table. So I go back up here and see if I can find one that shows me the field names. And I think this one here, select column, this last one will do that. This will select columns from a table. Now I know that my table is called passwords. So I'll replace this, not that one, but I'll replace this one here, okay. All right, the only difference is this is a passwords table, not the employees table. All right, and if I haven't made a mistake, this is going to give me all the columns in the password table, and it does. So there's ID and password. So now I could ask for the ID from the passwords table. Now if I tried to get the ID and the password from the passwords table, I could select ID password from passwords. There. Now it's going to complain because I tried to get 2 things. Now I could get them one at a time, like just the ID, and then the password separately, but I wouldn't know how to correlate them, and this is where you use concat. You can concatenate those 2 together to put them in one column. So I can do concat of ID comma, password. That makes one column that contains two pieces of data. And now I get this. And I could even, by the way, if I want to get classy, I could even put in a delimiter. And now I get a nice chart. So that's why I say the SQL injection means you can execute commands like the administrator, and this was the #1 vulnerability on the web until about 6 years ago, responsible for more than 90% of all the stolen data in the world, because it's easy and you steal all the data in a database. And it remained that way for like 10 or 12 years after SQL injection was invented, and the only thing that changed that was the development of the Amazon S3 buckets, which are even worse. We've managed to lose even more data than SQL injection. People put all their data in the cloud, and it was by default readable to everybody, and a lot of people didn't know that. So just huge databases were just exposed. So now that's not the default anymore in Amazon, but the damage is done. And this does keep happening, yeah.
So escape character for the single code is backslash.
What's that?
The escape character to escape, say my name is Kevin O'Brien.
Yeah.
There is a default, by default I have a single quote in my name.
Oh, you want to know how to put in an apostrophe?
Yeah.
Yeah. The recommended procedure is to just use 2 apostrophes. So you do O-Neil. That's the escape character they recommend. That's yep. And see, that's not a flaw. This is what they say. Use 2 apostrophes is the way you escape 1 apostrophe in SQL. Does that answer your question?
No, actually my question is like I have a single apostrophe in my name.
Yeah.
Okay, so how should I select? I should have a backslash or?
I don't need it. Yeah.
You do actually.
Well, I don't think so because I have this.
I know, but they said I.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right. Anyway, well, as far as I know, this is what you're supposed to do in SQL. In Bash, you'd use a backslash, but in SQL, you use this. In fact, I think if you try backslash in SQL, I don't think it'll work. Nope. Okay, it takes that too. That's interesting. I guess that does have the effect here. It's a good question. I know the recommendation is use 2 apostrophes, but I guess a backslash might work too. And by the way, when you get into this kind of issue, it is really tricky because you have to consider all the languages you're passing through. I'm passing through HTML encoding to send it to the web, then PHP, then SQL. And each one of them has their own rules about special characters. So it can get very confusing. And I always just try a lot of options. I do it by brute force. It was a good question. So anyway, there's some flags to find here. Now, if you want to do it the way real pen testers do it, they use SQL Map. SQL Map is an automated tool that will automatically do all these injections for you. And you can use it on a Linux machine. It's included in SQLi. And I have some project here with instructions that you can try. If you get it working, then you can practice using SQL Map on my target here. And that's kind of fun. But the other thing I wanted to show you, which is very interesting to do manually, is blind SQL injection. So here, I got another field where I'm going to search for a name. So if I search for Bill Gates in this database, it finds Bill Gates. So that seems normal. And it's doing it with this query, select name from employees where name equals the data from the user. So that's fine. But what if I search for X? Now, there is nobody named X, so I get no results. So far, this looks the same as what we had before. But if I try doing this injection, like this one, for example, I could do the 1 equals 1, but this is another way to do the same thing. You make an unmatched apostrophe at the end to eat up the last apostrophe. So if I do that, now this could make a condition which is always true, but I don't get any data. So what's going on here is it runs the query, but it doesn't show you any data from the database. Just if it's true, it echoes back what you put in. So you don't get any data from the database no matter what you put in. So it might seem like you can't get anything done, but you can, because here, if I change this to a false condition, like B equals A, now I get no answer. So I can get 1 bit of data. If I get an answer, that condition is true. If I don't get an answer, that condition is false. So this is like the game 20 questions. All you can get is 1 yes or no answer. But you can totally narrow things down that way. And so now, if I wanted to know how long the database is, the database name, I can put in this one. And what this will do is if the length of the database name is 1, it will give me an answer. But it's not 1, so I get no answer. However, it is therefore greater than 1. And that's true. So I can pretty quickly zero in and find the length of the database, and then you can find everything. You can find passwords, but you have to do them 1 letter at a time. You use that substring to pick out the first letter of the password. And so here's, for example, is an example of this kind of thing. Here I'm going to do a name instead of a password just as a demonstration here. So I'm going to select the name from employees, where the name is Bill Gates, and substring of name 11 is B. So does Bill Gates start with a B? And the answer is that's true, so I get an answer. Now if I make it so this is an A here, it doesn't start with an A, so that's false. And by the way, you don't have to do 26 questions to find things because letters are numbers. It's not A, but it's greater than A. You can use greater than or less than for letters. It's just ASCII code. So it's greater than A, and that's true. So you can actually narrow it down and spell out passwords and names of tables and everything else. It's all there. And that's called blind SQL injection. And it's kind of instructive to do it by hand here, and SQL Map will do it automatically. It will automatically do the dozens or hundreds of queries it takes to extract data with this technique. And there are other kinds of techniques where the query might take longer when it's true than when it's false, and so you can use time-based SQL injection. They all amount to about the same thing. So you should play with that if you're not well practiced with SQL injection. This is the most important one you hear all the time. More than command injection is SQL injection. It's more common and has been more of a disaster. Command injection is also very bad, but this is more common because even textbooks would tell you to implement SQL the wrong way. And something I just learned about a week ago from a captured flag, there is a way to prevent this called PDO. PDO is a way to connect to a database where you don't have a line of code that is parsed this way. Let me run this one again. Here we have, the problem here is we have this, select name for employees where name equals X, and it's matching this apostrophe from the user with this apostrophe from the developer. If you use a PDO connection, you put the name in a data object, and the data object is always treated as a data object. It cannot be misinterpreted as a code object. So you can put in apostrophes or anything, and nothing bad will happen. And this was considered a perfect defense against SQL injection. But the thing I learned last week is that PHP, in fact, when you use the PDO data connector, unless you change an environment variable, which from its default value, it doesn't actually use the PDO connection. It simulates it imperfectly, and you can still do SQL injection with a different series of special characters. We thought this was totally solved, but PHP handles it so sloppily that it's not actually solved. So anyway, it keeps coming back to bite us. Anyway, so give that a try. That's the next logical step after command injection. And I guess I'll mention while I'm here, another thing you might try is this is the Windows command injection, where instead of using bash command line, you use the Windows command line. So down here is a Windows server, and this will give you the contents of a directory. So if you just give it a dot, it'll show you the files in the root directory, and now you can execute additional commands with like an ampersand. So it's very much like the ping injection, but you're not injecting into bash, you're injecting into the Windows CMD shell. But it's very much the same thing. And in this case, you'll find that you are the administrator. So this server gets trashed more often than the others. But anyway, again, there's flags to find. That's the Windows version of it. So try some of those things. I'll stop this video.